welcome to the Comics, Cards, and Brew show, episode number dos. If you don't know what dos means, that means two. You never know. I was a big Spanish guy growing up. I struggle with learning languages. I should have chose Latin.
Right.
And
so now you don't have to do a Spanish countdown on every episode.
Oh, no, Marvin.
You started it. You can't stop it now. Now you have to do it every episode.
Well, Marvin, when we get to the higher ones, you're going to do them. Then if I have like a higher one, I'm like, hey, you do it. Or you'll see me looking down like, it's episode number. Well, guys, as you can see, I've got Marvin back here. We had such a good time with our first show that I couldn't think of somebody else I wanted to do an episode 2 with. His knowledge on comics and on the comic world is an untapped resource. So for me not to call him back would have been stupid on my part. So he's come back here so we can discuss one of the biggest things everyone talks about, and that is, well, number one, the MCU, but also the effect the comic book film has had on the comic book industry. So my first question, Marvin, for you, and see, I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you a question. I just like to throw it at you. If you could pick one film from the MCU that would be your all-time favorite, what would it be?
That's a horrible question.
I know it is. Okay, I'll expand it. How about top 3?
Yeah, that's 21 movies. That's a lot of movies. So I would say Winter Soldier, Infinity War, and Spider-Man: Homecoming. Oh,
I'll be honest with you. Your last one surprised me.
Yeah. I think that I would go with, because this was the first time we've really embraced high school with Spider-Man in these movies. In the Raimi movies, you sped right through high school. It wasn't really a thing, and then you centered him in this. And I think that one of my favorite parts of that is when he's out in the suburbs, and he's getting ready. He's got his costume on. He's getting ready to swing, and he's like, "There's nothing around to shoot the web on to get any kind of traction or any height, and he has to start running." And it's just those. It's always with these movies, the little tiny things that you don't think make any sense or matter, and they do. And I want to just jump ahead real quick. In The Falcon and Winter Soldier, when they're showing the wall of Cap, and there's a picture in the small corner when he was holding up the cab window as a shield, and then you go back and watch First Avenger, and you see there's a woman with a camera. And you're like, who would have thought that you could use that later in another property that's like 21 films later after that? And it's just like I said, the details that they really get with these movies that make them so good. And even like with Winter Soldier, when you're dealing with a situation where you've got Captain America's best friend trying to kill him, and it's the scene when they are on the bridge and they're driving on the bridge, and he attacks them, and he's shooting, and Black Widow jumps into the front seat to get under Cap's shield, and then Winter Soldier's like, okay, he just takes the steering wheel. So it's like you just end the whole entire thing right there, where they can't drive the car without a steering wheel, and he's like, okay, all right, I got the steering wheel now, so what are you going to do now? And it's just those things that just escalate in these movies that make it so amazing. And then with Infinity War, you took the villain and made him the protagonist of the movie. Mm-hmm. And you're following around this Thanos, and you're getting in his mind, and you could only do that because you had built these characters up through other movies. So you didn't really have to bring backstory to those characters, or even explain who they were. They just showed up, and oh, there's Star-Lord and Gamora and all these other characters, and you don't have to do that because you already established them in the universe. And so you could focus on one character, and him being the villain of the movie didn't matter because it's his story now, because you're following him around as he goes around and he collects these gems or stones.
No, I see. I love the way you said that, because it's true. When you look at Infinity War, it is Thanos' story. I mean, all the other films were origin stories, but if you look, like you said, the Easter eggs, they all built up towards this moment to where, like, I just watched Thor 2. Was it Thor 2, I think? Or no, I think it was Ultron, where he has where he goes back and he gets that vision in the pool where he sees the glove and all the stones. And at the time, like, oh, that's really cool. But when you go back and watch it, knowing what comes to you, like, oh man, mind exploded. Yeah. So, I mean,
and that's always a good thing is about when you lay the groundwork for that stuff, and it helps to pull those movies up, like the WandaVision show helped to revitalize people's interest in Age of Ultron. Mm-hmm. Age of Ultron was always that the little movie that no one really liked, but they cared about it. They didn't really like it. Now you're saying that, oh, this happened in that movie too, and this happened. This is a better movie now. So I mean, it's just their thought process on that stuff is that you're using not only these shows to continue these stories of these side characters, but you're also using it to build up things that happen in those movies that make it more important.
I agree. I like it, and I think that the three you picked were good. You picked a very well-rounded. We would definitely share Infinity War in that one for sure. And when you think of these films in terms of like from our industry, the comic book industry, every time Marvel is planning, like the pre-COVID, because COVID definitely threw everything off in terms of what their release dates were. But when you knew that the movie was coming out, like from my standpoint, with owning a comic book store, I knew, okay, Avengers Infinity War is coming out. I need to, in my next shows, have anything that's got the Infinity Stones in it, anything that's got the glove, anything with Thanos, like all those things you had, all those books, even ones that were not even key issues. Like there's a cover that had, I think, was it Iron Man, I think, holding the glove in one point? And this is pre-Endgame, so I wish I'd kept this book. But it had him holding it. I think I sold that for like $36 when Infinity War hit. And before that, it was like a $5 book. So, I mean, even just the announcement of these films skyrockets comic book prices. And it's insane.
Yeah, and I think that's the funny part, because most of these books are sitting in dollar bins right now.
Yeah, they do.
So I actually did get a run of Captain America, like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that had the first appearance of John Walker in it.
Did you really?
A whole run for like $20 off of eBay.
Oh my God! You got the whole run for $20?
Yeah. I would say that anything that's relevant to Marvel itself is going to eventually show up sometime in these books. Because I also heard that people were looking for the issues with Isaiah Bradley. Yep. And they were sold. They're all gone now. They're all sold out because like they were all in dollar bins. Like nobody cared about those books like a couple months ago. Now they're all hot ticket items.
No, it's true. I can tell you from when I first started, there was times where like when I first went into the comic industry, I didn't really hone my ordering skills until later. Like if a number one came out, I'm like, oh, it's a number one. I'm going to order 5 of every one, including the variants, just because I thought I needed to. And now you have to read the product description to see, especially with Marvel, because there's stuff that they'll sneak in those previews that if you read are really important. They'll say this is now option for a TV deal, whatever. And as you know, like I'll give an example too that's outside of Marvel. So did you ever see The Old Guard on Netflix?
Yes.
Okay. Did you like it?
Yes.
Okay, so when I first started Comics, Cards, and Brew, which is my second company with comic books, the Old Guard Force Multiplied #1 came out the first month when I was placing orders. I'm like, I'm going to order. It's a #1. Let's order them. Thank God I ordered heavy back then. I think I ordered 6 of like cover A and 4 of cover B and C. And then when the film came out, when it was announced, I'm like, I need to go and check. Do I have any left? So I went back, and a book that had cost me $1.65 to $1.75 to order back in the day sold for $4 back then. I had 3 left. I brought them back out the week before the film was to debut on Netflix, and I sold them each for $40 a piece.
Oh, awesome.
And that was a book that had just come out 2 years prior. So even non-MCU titles, when they get optioned for film or for Netflix or Hulu, they just want to have it. And I feel like Marvel is one of the only ones where it's not a wave. The books tend to hold their value longer than like the Old Guard. Now I know got optioned for a second film, so they'll go back up again. But typically, if you have a book like that and you're wanting to move it, you need to do it within like 2 to 3 weeks prior to its release date, just in case it flops. Yeah, I mean, luckily Old Guard didn't flop. I thought it was phenomenal, but you just
I mean, the same thing happened with Invincible. That issue 1 popped up in price really high. Even some of the reprints were.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe the reprints went for that. I thought I was reading it wrong when it said reprint. I couldn't believe the price it was going for. I was shocked.
Right, because no one could get the originals because they were. And once again, something that slipped into the dollar bin, and somebody probably went out and pulled them all everywhere they could.
If you honestly, if you have think about these guys that have had comic book stores for the last 20 years who have seen the beginning of. I mean, because if we really want to look at film, when they really started upping comic book value was probably, in my opinion, in the early 2000s is when it really started affecting hugely prices of books. When you think of like when X-Men coming out and all those different ones that started to kind of follow the rise of it. And when you look back to that, I can't imagine what these guys who had those dollar bins, I guarantee they're running out there. Don't open the store yet. We got to grab those dollar bin books. Pull that shit out. We can't do this. I mean, it's like, don't open. Oh, no, we don't open at 12 today. We're opening at 1 o'clock. Like, I can see what they're doing.
Right. I know that there was a big run on, was it NYX for X-23's first appearance, too.
Yeah, because I think that's number 7, right? Isn't it the 7th one, I think? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That one.
So I got lucky that I was able to grab that one, but then I was actually and I hoping that it pays off with me. I got the first appearance of Phantom X.
Oh.
And nice. In one of the X-Men books. I'm hoping that he shows up in one of these movies pretty soon. I mean, you can't. I mean, I couldn't even get at the Deadpool, and I couldn't get at Avenging Spider-Man #9 for the first appearance for Carol Danvers' first as Captain Marvel. Because the price just skyrocket, and one of the absolutely worst things that ever happened to me is that I had a box of X-Men that I left where I lived before, and the box disappeared, and I had like X-Men 266. Oh. And I was able to get the annual later because the annual actually came out before.
Yeah, so it's technically the first. Yeah,
it's technically his first appearance, but they always say 266
full appearance.
But I did go through some books I had recently, and I did have X-Men #10 first appearance of Omega Red.
Oh, nice. And that's another one that, like, when you and guys, the reason we're talking about this is when you think about things and you're wondering, should I get this book, should I not? If it's one that they're saying there's a new character or a first appearance, even if the book is cover price now, once people start catching on to that, the book, even without a movie going, the book's going to go up in value because it's a first appearance, or a character dies or something gets introduced. I mean, any type of book like that, like for instance, Venom 200, I think is coming out on this week's pre-orders. I'm probably going to order, I've already had one guy tell me he's going to order 5, so I'm going to have to order a lot of those because those are landmark issues without even films, applying into it, like first appearance with God Butcher for Thor, things like that, just and just keep going up in value.
Yeah, because I know the first appearance of Jane Foster as Thor is starting to creep up too.
And that one, honestly, I wish when you mentioned like Avenging Spider-Man #9, I bought the entire Avenging Spider-Man storyline back when it came out because I'm a Spider-Man fan. And I remember when I had that book, I almost didn't buy that one because I'm like, who is this? Like, who care? I'm like, okay, that's part of the series. I'll buy it. So I bought it when it came out, and I sold that one. I wish I kept it. I sold it years ago for like $60 back when they first were announcing Captain Marvel, and I probably should have held on to it because that's one that hasn't dipped yet. It's still holding a crazy price.
Right. It's still holding. It's probably going to climb up again when the next movie comes out.
Yeah, and I think that's true.
Yeah. The movies are affecting the prices. The one thing that I wish they would do with the movies is after before the end credits, to just do a rundown. If you want to get into more of these stories and read more about it, get to your local comic shop and give a list of books. These are the books you could be picking up at your local shop. I wish they would do that. I wish, because that would help seriously revitalize some comic stores with telling people to go to the store.
Yeah,
but that could backfire because if you remember around Captain America Civil War time, Captain America was a Nazi. So
that's right. It was during the Hydra thing. You're right. Yeah. Sorry about the cat being in here.
Hey, buddy.
What do you want to talk about, Max? You don't like comic books. Get out of here, you villain. Oh my gosh. Sorry, guys. But you're right. He was with Hydra at the time.
Yeah. So I mean it could backfire. A lot of times where he wants to play.
There you go. Little head nod. Little head nod. There you go. Let me move him real quick. I used to have this issue when I was writing, and I used to hate it. He would walk all over my keyboard back in the day. Captain America, by the way, one of your favorite films. I've got the Captain America shirt on. Oh, come on, buddy. Okay. There you go.
So it's always going to be that thing where there's always going to be that chance where you walk in. Somebody says, hey, I just watched X movie. I want to know more about this character. And you want that person to feel comfortable. And you don't want to give him Hydra Captain America. This is the first book they read because they're like,
that'd be so funny.
What the heck is this? What is this guy doing? He's
this isn't what I just saw?
Yeah, he's telling Deadpool to go and kill people? What? What's this?
That'd be so funny.
Yeah, but I mean, that was the one good thing that came out of that storyline was Deadpool becoming Deadpool again. When Captain America comes after Deadpool later, he says that you told me to do it. He goes, that wasn't me. He goes, but Captain America gave me an order. I'm not going to tell Captain America no. And that just resonates so much with, yeah, if Captain America gives you an order, you're like, all right, I'm not going to question it.
Yeah, no, you don't, because it's Captain America.
It's Captain America, and it's like, I didn't know you were Hydra Captain America. It's not my fault.
Yeah, no. And the only part they ever have played on that, which it wasn't really playing on it, but it's the part where he gets on the elevator. I think it's in Endgame, and he leans forward and whispers, "Hail Hydra."
Yeah,
and it gets a voice. I'm like, oh. And I don't know if you were looking at that time when when Endgame came out, and that scene was done. That book for a moment started to go up a little bit just because of that part in Endgame, which is like, I'm like, really? It's not even the storyline.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But
then since you brought up the elevator scene in Winter Soldier, I'm like, that's one of the good things about that movie. It's like you got Captain America surrounded by people and he just kicks all their asses.
Yes. Hardcore.
It's like before we get started, does anyone want to get off?
No, that's
like, wow. And then he dives out of the elevator. I'm like, oh man, this is like vintage Captain America.
It is.
And this is the one thing that I think Marvel gets right about that character, and what DC or Warner, whoever, gets completely wrong about Superman.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I'm kind of glad you brought up Superman, because when you really want to look, when you think about, the comic book selling, like the highest selling comic book, the one recently was, I forget what the grade was on it, but it was an Action Comics #1. It went for like $3.3 million, I think, or something like that in auction. So when you think about a character that clearly holds so much value, you would think that you would do your best to make the films worthy of matching at least like what we would come to like to see in Superman, which is,
right.
And I find that when you go back to the first one that came out in 1978, that's when the first Superman film debuted. You had Marlon Brando, you had Christopher, you had good actors, in that film. It wasn't to the point now to where if somebody approaches you now for a Marvel or DC film, you're like, sign me up, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
But you still had a big name. Both were big, they were well-known names at the time.
Right.
And I don't think Marvel had a film come out till correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Blade the first theatrical release film that was a Marvel character? I know
like you had a bunch of those TV ones with like Incredible Hulk, but it was Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher, but he didn't wear the skull. So it's really weird to call it a Punisher movie. But then when they did the comic adaptation, they had the skull on. But I'm like, why wouldn't you, what's up, Dolph? You don't want to be the Punisher? You don't want to wear the skull? Come on, man.
He was a big guy. He was a big guy back at the time.
Yeah, like
before he was like, he was huge.
Yeah. He had a name, and I like to go back and have him, like, I wish someone would do like a article or interview and ask him about that. Why didn't you wear the skull? And I can guarantee you he was the one that probably said he didn't want to do it, or they didn't want to tie it directly to the comic, because you think that, like, after you had Superman, you had Superman 2, which was a disaster because the director left and all this other stuff, and the S, and did he kill Zod or didn't he kill Zod, and all the other stuff that went on in that movie, and Superman getting some payback on that guy at the end and all that kind of stuff. You're like, I don't know about this one. But then you went to Superman 3 and you brought in Richard Pryor, and
who is funny as hell.
Yeah. But in Richard Pryor's biopic, he wrote that in his book, he was high the whole entire time he did that movie.
What?
And he was ad-libbing lines in that movie a lot because he couldn't remember his lines.
Oh my God.
And
that's
if you
awesome.
Like, with that information, and when you go and watch it, when I found out about it, I watched movies, like, you can tell the whole entire time he's got on his mind.
Dude, I'm no joke. I'm gonna have to go back, and I did not hear that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that, because what's crazy is when you look at and that's the problem too. You have Superman. You had the first successful film for a comic book movie. The first one to come out that was in theatrical release and all that. So you would think you'd want to get that shit right with number 2. And when you go back, like, being a Superman fan, when I go back and watch number 2, I do like it, but it does fall short of the first. And then when you get to 3 and 4, when you get to the Quest for Peace, as a kid, I thought the guy with the long fingernails and stuff was cool. But now as an adult, I watch that going, what the hell were they thinking? Like, you're going to end it with that?
Yeah.
Like, that's your ultimate end wrap up to this character that I like, and now I'm embarrassed to say I've watched that film. Like,
And then like you said, that you go along that line and you look at the second movie and you see all the you do the backstory. You see all the turmoil that went on with directors leaving, and you couldn't use Marlon Brando anymore, and it's just a mess of a movie that just falls to the side and can't get back up again. It seems like, and like I said, that like you've got Superman. It looks like he killed Zod. It looks like he killed him. But then there's the TV cut where they showed him getting arrested and taken off to jail by the Arctic police. Which what the heck is an Arctic police?
The Arctic police.
Yeah, like you got a big truck says Arctic police. I'm like,
it is. Oh God.
Yeah, and then and then he's taking the S off, and the guy's got beams, but you can't lose with Terrence Stamp chewing up the scenery as Zod especially when he goes, we're going to go take over the planet Houston. I'm like, oh goodness, it's so hilarious. It's so goofy that you just can't get mad about it.
Yeah, you can't.
With everything that goes on that movie. But then when you go to 3 was originally supposed to be Brainiac, was supposed to be the villain.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Okay.
And that fell apart. And I assume they just had a contract with Richard Pryor to bring him in. And everything about the movie is telling you this is not the movie they wanted to make, because you had the guy who's his boss is pretty much just Lex Luthor all over again, because it's still another scheme to make money. That's all those movies were about, was Lex Luthor scheme, make money. And you're watching this and you're like, this doesn't seem like a Superman movie, because he's not doing Superman stuff. So he becomes evil Superman. Yep. But what he does is evil is he writes the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Remember that scene?
He blows out the torch at the Olympics. I'm like, he's not a evil. He's just a jerk.
Yeah, he's just.
Then he goes to the bar and gets drunk.
Yep.
And you're thinking as a child, you're like, this is dumb. I don't want to watch this. I feel bad.
I'm watching this. That's horrible.
Right. And then Superman is evil because his suit is dirty. He starts growing a beard.
Okay. Hello. I'm halfway there right now. So
yeah, it's
come on.
What's going on with this movie? Who wrote this? And you can tell Richard Pryor is just there just because they had a contract, and they just all right, put him in this movie, and then where his contract is over, or we can rewrite a new contract for him. And then Superman 4, it's just that's not even worth talking about. It's just
no, it's not. Oh no, and when you think about it, not too long. I had the date pulled up here. Not too long after Superman 4, they did the first Batman. And when you look back at that, when Batman came out, there was already a bad taste in people's mouths because of Superman 4. I mean, now granted, you had RoboCop came out the same year Superman 4 did, but that kind of didn't get the publicity that, because I think the first RoboCop movie is great, and a lot of people don't associate that with comics, but it was a comic book. Yeah. But when you
I think the thing with it had going against it was the violent stigma. So you had a NC-17 cut of the movie that they had to cut down to an R. And then it's not accessible to children because you've got hands getting blown off, people getting shot in the head. And I don't if you watched the unrated cut.
I didn't know there was an NC-17 cut. No,
usually on Netflix or streaming they have the unrated cut. Okay. And so his Murphy's death scene is way more graphic than it is in the regular movie, where you getting his legs and stuff and hands and shot off in that scene. Oh, shit. They do it the one scene when he's standing there going and they're shooting him, that was originally panned out, and you could see all the bullets hitting him. They panned in on it to make it less violent.
Jeez, see that, and I think that's just, I want to say at the time, because like I said, and we talked about this prior to it, comic books films were not meant to be Academy Award winners. They weren't meant to be giant blockbusters. That's not what they were designed for. When you think of back until the 2000s, a comic book film was looked at as an action junkie flick. It was looked at as, I'm going to go there and watch a film that I don't have to pay attention to, that I don't have to divulge any emotion or connection into it. And honestly, I hate to say it, it does fall on DC's fault a little bit with the way the Superman franchise went. The Batman, same thing. Batman started off up here, and by the time you get to Batman Forever, I'm not going to mention the fourth film because I'm not going to talk about that. That's terrible. But when you look at that, it is really, it is one of those things that, you went to go see. You didn't expect any big, great acting scenes. You didn't expect a lot of character development. You expected to see people getting killed or fight scenes and things like that. And if I had to ask you, do you remember seeing Blade when it came out in 98?
Yes.
So when Blade came out, I was 10, so I was not allowed to go see it. My mother was like, "No, you can't see that film. It's rated R, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "It's vampires. It's badass. Let me go see it." I didn't know it was a comic book. Yeah. I did not. I was not reading Blade. Blade was not a huge character that I had known about at the time. So I remember going to see that in theaters. It was a pretty packed movie theater, and it made me jump as a kid. I was 9 or 10 when it actually was in theaters. So I remember jumping and seeing that in the movie theater. And back then, I don't know if Marvel made very much money off that because they didn't own Blade's rights at the time.
No, that was New Line. So, and the thing that you'll remember is that a lot of these movies didn't even advertise that they were based on comics. It would say based on the graphic novel.
No, you're right.
It's a graphic novel because it was to be the stigma of, you say comic books are for children. We don't read comic books. We're sophisticated. We're sipping our tea with our pinkies up because we're sophisticated. We don't read comic books.
No, I drink my Diet Coke like this. Come on.
Yes. So it's just that stigma that you have with that. They didn't even it said, I don't even think they acknowledged Marvel until the end of in the credits at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. I don't think it said anything about Marvel Comics in that. And the second one it did.
Yes.
Because the second one, now you had X-Men out in the world.
Yep.
And now it's all comics are cool now. We can get behind these things because they can make us money. And once that money comes in, now all of a sudden, we read comics.
No, it's true. And when you think about the first X-Men film with Hugh Jackman, he did not make anywhere near the amount of money he made by the time he finished with Days of Future Past and stuff like that. But when you think about comic books related to that, in the 90s, that's when they had that massive, printing of comics and of cards. Mm-hmm. And then in the 2000s, Marvel sold a lot of their properties before the movies started even becoming popular. Now Disney's still trying to buy back some of the stuff from Sony and from other ones like that. Right. And I mean, you might remember better than I would. I don't know if Blade impacted the first appearance of him in the Tomb of Dracula. I'm not sure if that would have been. I don't remember hearing anything about that.
No, because the movie didn't mention that it was a comic. So no, anyone who didn't already know, if your Blade was on the Spider-Man animated series, but that series was so tamed down that Spider-Man wasn't allowed to even throw a punch in that show.
Really?
Yep. So you bring in a vampire hunter, and he can't stab anybody. So it's just why is he even here? But I mean, it's so strange as you march down the years and you watch as these things become, they go from being fandom things where it's nerds in dark rooms reading comics and playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then you find out that Vin Diesel plays D&D. And then you see all these celebrities. Now we have D&D parties. This stuff used to be things that you did in the dark so no one would know. Yeah. You would, if you were sitting down and you're watching cartoons and someone walked in, you would change the channel real quick because you didn't want anybody to know. Now it's this cool thing that everyone wants to do now, and it's weird. It's so weird to take that away from the fandom, and all of a sudden it's this big pop culture thing that's melting pot for all this stuff. And it's good to see that stigma's gone. But it's just going to be replaced by another stigma because people still get on people playing video games. So
true, that's true. But I will say though that if it weren't for the movies boosting comic books the way they have over the last 20 years, I don't know if I would be in the industry like I am. I mean, who knows? Because I mean, me growing up, I loved the first X-Men movie. You got to think I was 13 at the time when that came out, so I was like, oh shit! Now everybody likes X-Men because I was like you before when I'd read comic books. I didn't tell my friends when I played soccer and sports. Man, I read that shit hidden. I'm like, I'm gonna read this in the car and finish it before I get there because Pokemon was the one that everybody did because it was hot to collect that and all that kind of stuff. But comic books, it wasn't cool to say, hey, what'd you do on Saturday? Oh, I spent 3 hours at a comic book store. They'd be like, nerd. And now you're like, I spent 3 hours looking for the first appearance, looking for this, and it's definitely become a cultural phenomenon that, you said, has taken over in the last 15, 20 years.
Right. And then when you go back to X-Men, the funny thing about it is that Mr. Feige was on X-Men.
He's producer, right?
Yep. And he brought ideas to Fox on the universe, telling them, so this is how we do all the connections and all this other stuff. And they were like, get the hell out of here. Nobody wants that.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
See, and that's the crazy. When you look at Kevin Feige and you look at Jon Favreau, got two men who have completely shifted the viewpoint on Star Wars and on Marvel. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kevin Feige, like his name. That's a household name in terms of this industry. And when you look back and watch those early films, like I didn't know he was on X-Men. I saw him in Spider-Man. I watched Spider-Man 2 the other day and his name popped up. I was like, oh shit, there's Kevin Feige. And to think that they turned down advice of the man who literally created the MCU, him and because Jon Favreau did the first Iron Man. So when you think back to that first movie, that when Iron Man came out, superhero movies were on the rise. It was cool to go see, like Spider-Man 3. Everybody wanted to go see that. It was becoming a somewhat more acceptable thing to go and do. But I don't think until Iron Man was created, you still didn't have a real personal connection as much to him. I mean, the X-Men movies a little bit when Xavier gets killed, and the one that no one really likes, X-Men 3 and stuff. But in terms of a character where their death literally brings together every other character in that universe, like what happened in Endgame, I've not seen that done in any other superhero film or franchise.
And the funny thing is that you probably never will.
Yeah, I don't think
no. The only studio that could do that again is the MCU. They're the only ones that could do something like that again. Like, I mean, they try and they fail. Like even Sony, they have Valiant. And they decided, and they gave away Harbinger and Faith to Paramount because they didn't want to deal with the baggage. They did Bloodshot. I mean, will there be another Bloodshot? But they can't do a Valiant universe now because they've given up some of the characters.
So they can't do their own. They can't do an MCU.
No. And I think the writing's on the wall with that. How many they've tried, they failed. They tried, they failed. The only ones that have been successful with it is Conjuring and I guess MonsterVerse.
I was just gonna say that the MonsterVerse. Yep.
Those are the only two that have been able to successfully do it. They haven't done it as long as MCU has done it. But I mean, they're putting their pieces together and trying to put a universe together. But then you had like the Dark Universe. It was supposed to be Frankenstein and Dracula and all that.
Mummy.
That failed with the first movie, The Mummy. So that it was like they were like, oh, they made an announcement, we're going to do this, and this, and then like, never mind, forget it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing. We were talking about that too in terms of writing and when films come out. There are movie deals and TV show deals offered all the time. They're offered like candy. I mean, it gets tossed out like anybody's business. But when you sit down and they try to make a film and you've taken an idea that's been around for, sometimes some of them are new, but sometimes you have ideas that have been around for 40, 50 years, these characters, you have enough information, you have enough of a story to be able to put it to film. Marvel has shown that if you will take the time, and I think they need to get out of that stigma of this is just an action flick, that this is all, like, you're catering to the wrong group. It's now proven. I mean, like, I'm looking right here. Avengers Endgame's worldwide gross was $2.7 billion. I mean, like, if you let that sink in, it clearly shows Avengers Endgame is one that reached across all genres. It's not just a superhero film. You've got people who watch romance movies that came in to watch that. You've got ones like horror movies that come in. The MCU has tackled and shown what no other superhero film has done, and that's that they can be relevant films, and they are worth getting Oscar movies. They're worth going to see, just up there with anything else. Like, I think, didn't you say that the 3 of the MCU films were in the top of all time? I think you said. Yeah,
it's pretty much all the Avengers movies.
right here. So Endgame was 2.7.
Endgame and Infinity War and
$2 billion. Yep.
And the first one. Yep. And then Age of Ultron is down there just a little further.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it is crazy that you look at the top 10 grossing superhero films of all time. Almost all of them, only one of them is not Marvel, and that's Aquaman. That ranks at number 9. The rest of them are all Marvel films. Even The Dark Knight Rises, which I thought was great, ranks at number 12. So, and I think those films, the Dark Knight trilogy, I loved. I love Christian Bale. I thought it was a good universe. But once again, there was something about it that was, and I think Christopher Nolan is a phenomenal director. I think he does an excellent job with his films. But I do, if you look at the WB or DC, there's a similar thing you see throughout that, and it's that none of their films really grasp it. And I don't know and I don't think it's Christopher Nolan's fault. I think it comes from a higher up executives at WB, because they fail every single time. So it's got to be somebody higher up that just doesn't understand or grasp that concept.
Well, it's like that 3 strikes you're out method, where they can get up to 2 or 3 movies, and then it's like, oh, fall off the bench. Like, even with this Snyder stuff, it's Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, Justice League, and that's it. Move on. It's a reboot.
And I think and people have tried to say that the Spider-Man they'll compare the Spider-Man reboots to it, but what they fail to understand is the MCU did not own Spider-Man until Civil War. So before that,
and they didn't do the origin again, and Uncle Ben is nowhere to be seen.
No, not. And honestly, that's kind of refreshing because Marvin and I talked about how often you see Batman's parents get killed, and it's almost like a broken record. Okay, we've seen it. Let's move on. And the MCU actually did a fresh take with Spider-Man. Marvin was telling me earlier how it's the first one where they do dive into his high school era. They don't just skip over and make it 20 minutes. They dive into it and really show you what his high school time is like, and I love that.
So you're going to have actually more like you have 3 movies with him in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really do. Yep. And to me, I think COVID really did, not only COVID, but if you look at Endgame was such a good film and wrapped up so many storylines that as a writer, from my standpoint, I remember watching that going, what can you do to top that? Like, I remember sitting back going, man, I remember I looked over because my wife went to see it when it came out, and I leaned over and said, what the hell are the writers going to do now? Like, that's that to top yourself like that, to me, would seem very daunting.
Yes. Yeah. And then I think that's why their overarching plan was to take Disney Plus and take those minor characters and make them bigger using those TV shows. So now when you take a Scarlet Witch and all of a sudden you're going to take her to Doctor Strange and say that, all right, so now we're going to use her to prop up Doctor Strange a little bit. So I think that's what you're going to see these characters start to pop up in other things, and then use them, prop them up. And then you're going to look at this movie Eternals, and you're going to say that you made a tree and a raccoon popular. You made an Ant-Man movie. There's nothing they can't do. You made Howard the Duck is probably one of the worst movies ever, people say. But then he's in Guardians of the Galaxy, and everybody's like, we want a Howard the Duck movie. How does that happen?
How does that happen? It's a reverse.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the character is cool because he's in this movie.
And when you think about it, I will say one thing, that if the films continue to be as successful as they are, and even if other franchises try, like Bloodshot was everyone was dissing it, how bad it was, but they gave it a shot. They tried, they took a chance, they made a film. And I'll be honest with you, I had some Bloodshot #1s that came out back in like 2017 or 2018, and they were selling for $18, $19. So for me, I'm okay with it because you can capitalize on it.
I mean, the only thing I didn't like is they didn't keep the white skin.
Yeah.
I think that's a trademark of that character, and if he's not wearing the white skin, he's Dominic Toretto or he's Riddick. He's not Bloodshot. He's Riddick or Dominic. He's one of those two. And I think you need to have that in the movie to differentiate him from those other characters that he plays, because it's just like, oh, he's using the same voice and he looks the same. He's Riddick. I don't care who he says he is. You're Riddick.
No, that is true, and I think that's another issue that some people have with WandaVision. People were talking how much they didn't like WandaVision, and I've gotten to a point where whenever a new film or new show comes out, I kind of put aside what I know from the comic books and just watch it in terms of either the MCU or in terms of, okay, it's a new, like when The Old Guard came out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch it just as an origin story, see if I like it, see where they go with it. And sometimes they're successful and other times they flop. And I'm like, at least they tried. Yeah. But like you said, with Bloodshot, they should have done that. I agree with that 100%.
And then the other example you'll use is the 2 Dredd movies. So you had Dredd, Judge Dredd, and then you had Dredd. 15 minutes into that movie, that helmet came off for Stallone. Yeah,
that's true.
And the Dredd, that helmet went on at the beginning of the movie, and it never came off.
Yep.
Because Dredd doesn't take his helmet off ever. and I think that's the ego of the actor, because how many times in these movies is the character taking their mask off or losing their mask, and their mask is getting ripped because their publicist says, well, we need to have so-and-so's face on screen for this many minutes, so that mask got to come off. And I applaud, and I'm drawing a blank on his name from The Boys right now, but I applaud him for keeping that damn helmet on for that whole entire movie.
No, and it's the same thing with Mandalorian. He keeps it on there for the majority. I forget when it is he first does that, but I think that there's something of a sacredness to it, where if there's something that happens in the comic books and you maintain that, we as readers like it's almost like a aha moment. You're like, oh my gosh, they're finally getting it right. They're finally following what we would love to see.
Yeah.
And you know, to me, very rarely do I have a movie that, as much as the MCU films, especially Infinity War, where you know, I go to see a superhero movie, I expect certain things or want to see certain things. I did not go into Endgame expecting to tear up. I did. I knew where it was going. I knew that a lot of characters were going to die, but I thought that since I knew that going into it, it wasn't going to affect me. And man, I was wrong. I saw that movie 3 times in theaters, and every freaking time I teared up.
Yeah,
every time.
I mean, I think the one part that gets you is when Bucky comes out of the woods and he goes, Steve, and you see his arm, and his arm starts to disappear, and he just like falls to the ground. And then when they're on Titan, and I'm
not listening.
Spider-Man is I don't want to go. I'm like, oh my god.
I know. I hate that shit. and I'll tell you one thing too is that and this goes back to writing. 100% goes back to writing. Is that movie theater, especially the second time when the first time I went, there was no talking. I wanted when Thor first comes down to Wakanda and says, "Bring me Thanos." That's like everybody erupts. But once Bucky's arm fades and they all start to go, that movie, I've never had, like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking back to it.
Yeah.
It was dead silent all the way to the end. And then when it was done, usually people clapped. No one clapped. Everybody sat there for a few seconds. And usually you leave and you're talking about the movie. No one was doing that. It was like leaving a funeral. Everybody was so, and to me, that's successful. That is the movie that did what it came to do.
And that's what it was. Is like both my mother and my aunt goes, is that the end?
Yes.
Did the bad guy win? Because you're not, like, bad guys don't win in these movies. And like, yeah, he did what he said he was going to do. And in your mind, you're thinking that, oh, he's going to get to Wakanda and they're going to find some way to stop him.
Yep.
No, he gets all the gems. It's like, it's over. That's it. And you're like, oh, well, bad guy doesn't win. And then when Steve sits on the ground and goes, did we lose? Yeah, we lost. Everybody just lost. Yeah. And it's just a testament to that universe that they were able to pull that off and have the bad guy win. Like the only times you ever, when you go back, is that with the bad guy win in the movie, it's a horror movie or some kind of drama where the bad guy kills the guy he wants to kill or kills someone in their family. Or you go back to like Transformers or G.I. Joe when the Cobra and Decepticons win up to day 3 until they all regroup for day 4 and 5 and win the day. You're like, oh, it's over. So what do we just sit here and wait for the next movie? Something else going to happen?
No, it's true. And when you think of the way that like I'm going back right now and watching them in the timeline order. And I'll tell you what, when you go back through it, you can sense the build up to it, especially with knowing where it's going to come. Like I remember going into Infinity War and so the first time I went with my wife to see it, and I wouldn't tell her anything. I didn't say anything, and because I only knew a little bit. When Infinity War came out, I was with Dealmakers, Comics and Cards, the first company I was with, and I remember I knew people were going to die. But in the first 5 minutes, when Loki dies, I remember my wife looked at me and she goes, "So he's coming back, right?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "He just broke his neck." I'm like, "He's dead." And she goes, and she kind of looks at me and said, "Yeah." I said, "I didn't expect that to happen that soon." I'm like, "I think we're in for," and I told her, "I think we're in for a hell of a movie." And it was. That Marvel was saying, you took a character that was a huge part of the MCU, which is Loki, and you killed him in the first 5 minutes, which literally told everybody, nobody is safe at this point. Nobody is escaping this. This is not something where your favorite characters make it out unscathed in the end, which every other superhero movie tended to do. Yeah. And I think that's why now, when you look at what comic books are worth the most, it's Marvel and DC. I mean, but Marvel definitely, they're the ones who, when a new thing comes out, like Miles Morales, oh my God, his book is heating up like crazy right now. Ultimate Fallout, I forget what number it is. Their books, just because the writing is so good. And I think as long as Kevin Feige stays at the helm and you get the Russo brothers in there and Favreau, I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
No. I mean, but then they built up with it. So even though in Endgame you had some characters come back, then you lost some other characters. Yep. But then you went into these shows, and these shows are showing that the emotional toll that all this stuff is taking on these characters. Like you look at a Scarlet Witch, somebody who still, as you go through that series, still hasn't dealt with the trauma in her life.
True.
And you figure that, oh, she's just going to make things worse because now she's got this book and she's trying to learn about her powers and everything. And then you go into Falcon and Winter Soldier, and you see that Falcon is trying to get a loan for his sister for a boat, and they tell him, well, you've got no job history for 5 years. He goes, well, I was dead for 5 years. How can I have any history and any job history? And then you look at Bucky, and he's trying to make amends for things that he had no power or ability to stop doing. And then you throw Zemo into the mix. You're like, oh, this guy, man.
Yeah. Oh,
he's like,
that's talk about connecting.
Yeah. Yeah, you throw him into the mix, and he's like, oh, yeah, yep, shoot this guy, set this guy on fire. I don't give a damn about anybody.
Yeah, no,
he's like, I don't like superheroes. I don't like super soldiers. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop this until you guys aren't useful to me anymore. And you know it's going to go bad. And you're just waiting for him to go, flip that switch. You go, no, I'm killing you now, too.
That's very true.
And then did you see the trailer for the Loki show?
So I saw that it came out. I did not watch it yet. Did you see it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You need to check that out because it just shows because now you've got a Loki that isn't the Loki from Endgame. It's the Loki from the first Avengers movie, and he's still got that lunacy about him that I'm going to try to get out of this situation any way I can, and we're going to manipulate everyone in the room to get it. And then you've got Owen Wilson's character who's countering him and saying that I know every word you said. And there's a scene where they drop him into a room and there's a printout like this on the desk, and the guy hands him a pencil and goes, I need you to sign this. This is everything you've ever said. And he says, that's ridiculous. And then another piece of paper prints out. He puts it on top. It says, this is ridiculous. And he goes, I need you to sign this one too.
Oh my God. See, and I think that's one thing when you think about the excitement of the next the next addition to the MCU.
Yeah.
That in and of itself just shows that they're on the right path, you know. Yeah. And I think I know we're getting to the end. We've gone a little bit longer, which I love doing because, like I said, I could talk to you for hours and not even have it matter. But I know that Marvin and I, one of these times, we want to talk about how difficult it is to, like, when you're writing these stories, to not get ahead of yourself and want to have films. Because when you see these films and you see these shows, you're like, damn, I want to see my characters like that. I want to see my shit on screen.
Right.
It's very easy to get sucked into that and not, because I mean, and I'm going to use Robert Downey Jr. as an example here for one. When you look at him in the first Iron Man film, and he's very humble when you watch his interviews, like his Joe Rogan interview is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And when he did the first Iron Man, he actually was paid less than Terrence Howard in that movie because he was fresh off coming out of his rehab and everything. Right. And he even says, like, Iron Man changed his life. I mean, for the better. So, you know, you see that, you're like, God, I want him to be in one of my, you know, I want something like that in my character.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, even looking at that from the movie perspective, is that there's a lot of things that they didn't know. Like the thing I was talking about before with the picture of Captain America, they didn't know that up front. That was something that was added later. But it's just that energy and that flow that you have where you can go back and go, so we're going through scenes in the movie, Oh, that happened. Let's put this here. So I mean, that's how it is even with my writing. That's how it is. Like, oh, I go back and I look and go, oh, I can address that and do it here. So you have to build. You have to build the foundation, and then you have to do floor 1, floor 2, et cetera, et cetera. You just can't stop. You can't build a building from the top. It's just going to fall down, right? So you kind of start at the bottom and build your way up. You can't get to the 10th floor until you get to the 8th.
I feel like you're describing what happened with Justice League. I mean, they went from floor 1 and 2. You had Wonder Woman, you had Man of Steel, you had the Batman vs Superman, which is okay, and then boom, here's Justice League, and you're watching and going, what the hell did you do? Like,
right, and then what happens when you build something that fast? Like it's like Jenga, right?
Yep.
You pull one piece out, and the whole thing collapses.
Yeah, and honestly, when you look at you look at the MCU, I don't see it stopping. I see them continuing to go up. They've built such a good franchise. I don't see how they could ruin it at this point. Yeah. I don't want to jinx them, but when you look at sorry, Kevin Page. When you look at the DC universe, though, they now have this crumbled, broken foundation that nothing. Like, I feel bad for Aquaman 2 when that comes and all those other films, because now if you have that movie come out, you're having a sequel to a franchise that doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Right.
There's nothing said that there's gonna be another Justice League. You had the Snyder Cut come out, and everyone's like, "Oh, how great, how great." But I'm like, okay, but now you put a Band-Aid on a broken leg, so
Right.
you still can't stand on it. And so for me, I feel like that DC, if they really want to be anywhere close to the MCU, they've got their work cut out for them. They really do.
Yeah. I mean, they're in the position where they have to start from the bottom, and that's why I think that's why they came out and said what they said about that we're not continuing on with the Snyderverse because it's not going to work for them.
Yeah. So does that mean that Aquaman 2 and them are now done?
Well, no, they're still going to do those movies. So I mean, I think they're going to pick and choose what works and what doesn't work. But I think they're going to separate themselves from what Snyder wanted to do. So he's not. I don't think he's going to be involved anymore. But they're still going to continue with those characters until But I think it's going to be the 3 and out again because you look at Wonder Woman 84. They said that we're going to fast track the next Wonder Woman. We haven't heard anything about that since then.
Nope.
And chances are there's not only going to be 2 Aquaman movies. That they'll probably be done with that because Momoa probably wants out. So then it's going to just be done, and then you don't have anything. You have Flash, which is probably they're going to use to reset the whole universe, right?
Yep. I mean, and that's the sad thing is you have these actors that have made these characters their own in their own way, shape, and form. And, I can't imagine, like you look at Robert Downey Jr., who's had so many films that were successful in that universe to where, like, he's just Iron Man. He is Iron Man. I love it. Then you have, the WB and their whole DC universe, and you're like, okay, sorry, you guys are not you're pretty much being told that universe is done, so we're going to reboot. Probably not going to use you. Bye. That would suck.
Yeah, I mean, the chances of them rebooting any of the characters in Marvel are slim. I mean, that's what probably What If is going to be about is these different characters in different modes. But with DC, it's going to be continuously 3 reboot. It's going to just continuously keep happening because that's all they have. They can't sustain a universe.
No, which sucks for us who are writers who like to go off on that. Now, to the random person who doesn't understand or get into the comic industry, they probably don't care. But when you when you look at Marvel and then you look at DC, you go, God, how could 2 of the giants? You got these 2 giants in the whole thing, and they're so different, so opposite. It just it blows my mind.
Right, and then the worst part about it is that DC has something that Marvel never had. It still doesn't have access to all their characters.
Oh my God! See, and that's another part of it if Marvel had, from the time that Iron Man came out, if they had all the rights to everything, can you imagine how different or how much bigger the MCU would have been?
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, I would probably say that it wouldn't have worked the way it did.
No,
I think them not having X-Men and Spider-Man at the beginning and all that was good for them. It was good for them. It allowed them to go into their basket of toys and drag out these lower tier characters that no one cared about, and then made these people care about them.
Because I'll be honest with you, Iron Man, when I was a kid, that was not a comic book to buy. I'm not saying it wasn't good, but when I was a kid, it was Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, Venom, of course, was somewhat because of Spider-Man. But when you think of Iron Man and you think of Incredible Hulk, Hulk was okay, but he wasn't the top, like you said, those top tier characters. So I mean, the MCU is 100% responsible for how hot Iron Man _1 has gotten. I mean, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to look at the price jump in that book from the time Iron Man came out to like 3 years before that, hugely significant. I mean, huge.
Right.
I don't see that ever changing for Marvel. I think that if you guys are wondering what books to invest in, it'd be Marvel. I mean, 100%. If you can get your hands on stuff for good prices and you see movies coming out, get them. I mean, they're worth holding on to for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would just keep an eye on whatever movies are being announced and then run out there because you've got like American Chavez and Ms. Marvel and Ironheart and a bunch of other stuff coming out that's probably going to go up in price. I mean, I would keep an eye like on Armor Wars.
Yes, 100%. And Iron Man 2020, that was a recent one, but that one has started to climb up too in regards to that, which is surprising. Right. It's not surprised to see that.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So I'm looking forward to what comes next.
Well, I'm almost looking forward to what comes next from you. That's all we got. Yeah. We got your next book. So, guys, Marvin's the second issue is actually being previews next week, right?
The next previews, which I think that should be the week of April 19th. That should be in stores.
So guys, when that one comes
on
up,
the website.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when that comes up, guys, honestly, I'm gonna be ordering some for me. I'm gonna get some. I'm gonna send some to him and hope he signs them for me. You know, just like, hey,
you got some signed books coming to you. I just mailed them. I just dropped them off the post office today. But also make sure that when people are getting issue 2, order some more copies of issue 1. We need to fill those we need to fill up those shelves with the Edge and
no, hell yeah. Well, that's my thing, because what I would love to see is, like I said, not to get ahead of ourselves, but I'm not the writer, so I can say this. You can't get ahead of yourself, but I can.
Right.
I would love to see down the road that you've got this whole Edge universe, and then have somebody else, like the next Kevin Feige, come in and go, hey, this universe is already built. Let's just take this and run with it. That would be like, I'd be like, I knew him back when. And then you'd be like,
and I'll still be the same person I am right now too.
Good, because I guess you'd be like, who's that Chris guy? I didn't do an interview with that Chris guy.
I'll just be wearing a monocle. That's all. and all of a sudden I'll be speaking with an English accent.
Oh my God! Oh geez, and I'm gonna start speaking Spanish with it too. It's gonna be a crazy day.
And smoking a cigarette all the time on like a stick or something.
Oh my God!
I'll be dressed like Mr. Peanut, pretty much.
Oh, you know what? That would be interesting. Halloween
top hat for no reason. Yeah,
we'll do an episode like that. Well, Marvin, it was awesome to have you here again, man. Had a blast as always. So if you're down, let's do another one next week. So guys, for you guys to know. If you haven't seen the first episode where we talked about all of Marvin's world, creating the Edge universe, you need to go back and watch that. Excellent content. You get to learn about what he's doing. And if you want to know more, next week I'm actually going to we're going to do a live Q&A on the Facebook page where you guys get to come in and ask him the questions about it. So we're going to probably do, I don't know, what do you think, 4 hours, Marvin?
6.
6. Oh my God, the 6-hour cut.
Yeah, we're gonna run the gauntlet. We're gonna do better than Snyder. We're gonna do the 6-hour cut.
All right, so we're gonna do a 6-hour cut of interview. But honestly, all the joking aside, if you think of some questions, guys, honestly, come up with some good stuff. I'll probably have some extra ones to throw in there at him as well. So we'll see Marvin next week, and then look for episode 3. I'm interviewing a new person. Can't tell you who it is yet. It's a surprise, but Marvin knows them. So that's gonna debut this Thursday at 9 p.m. It'll be a live interview, so you guys will be able to participate in that one as well. So I'll probably sit back and be like this. Yeah. I'll just kind of relax. I'll be the one sitting back there with I'll have a little cigar, like, yes, and some brandy. I'm enjoying this very much.
Awesome.
All right, guys, you guys have a great night, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Night.